I'm going to talk about like related to off-campus housing. How you can search for these accommodation here in St. John's while coming to MUN. So first is like it provide you the more freedom or space of privacy, and it's a new life experience with responsibility, wider networking circle, cheaper if you planned it properly. So it has itself a few advantages as well. Next slide, please. So first, we generally advise all students like go for the temporary accommodation first when you are booking for you are searching for the off-campus accommodation, because we want you not to be scammed by other people, because it's very important like you view that apartment in person or maybe by virtual call. So you should view the apartment before paying any amount to that person. So we provide you the temporary accommodation, like you will be able to access that information if you send an email to arrivals@1.ca. There are the different, we would provide you the link for this information, and you will be able to access like hotels and hostels which are available in the St. John's, and guest accommodation which is available at MUN. But this accommodation is available till 15th of August, and it's only just 5 days left. So I don't think so you would be able to get access for that. And the other option could be for you is Airbnb, VRBO, and Kijiji. You can find the Kijiji and Marketplace and different website which provide the short-term rental accommodation to you. So that would be a good option as a temporary accommodation for you. Bahar, can you please change slide? So here are the different platforms where you can search for off-campus accommodation. So we provide the IO listing at Internationalization Office website. So you would be able to see the different listing which are available over there. And these are the few website and Facebook groups like Kijiji, Marketplace, Newfoundland Tenant Landlord Support Group, and other things which you would be able to access, and you would be able to see the different accommodation which are available for you as a long term or maybe sometimes a short term as well. Bahar, would you like to thank you. So this is the platform which is related to IO website, our internationalization office website, and we have collected we have provided the whole information related to off-campus housing for especially for international students, and you would be able to access all this information when you click on the new students link, and when you click go on the off-campus housing page. So you would be able to access where you can search for the accommodation, which are the different platforms as I mentioned in earlier slide, like which would be the other like which would be the other different website like Kijiji, Marketplace, and any other Zoomper and other websites where you can search for accommodation. So you would be able to see all these links over there. And the other option for you here is the housing option and renting resources. And renting resources provide you the whole information related to your rental agreement and the types of different like security deposit and what kind of things you should cover over there. And IO listing, this is an example. Yes, thank you, Bahar. So this is an example of IO listing. So you will be able to see the different listings which have been posted here. So you can contact those people and can ask them for to have to book their place or to rent their apartment. So this is the list, and you will be get able to see that the whole information is written there, like what would be the price of rent, and is it required a lease or is month to month, and how much rooms are available there, and how many number of people are living with you in that apartment. And it's also mentioned like the property location, but sometimes it doesn't mention the property location, but you can contact the specific person or the landlord. So they would be able to assist you and provide you the information related to address, and make sure like you contact them according to their written, like if they are asking to have a phone call, so make sure you call them. Yeah, and other is the Facebook group. So this is the platform of Facebook group like MUN of campus housing, and there are other Facebook groups as well. So you can join these groups. And this is the Kijiji website, how it looks like. You would be able to search here for your long-term accommodation as well. And this is an example of your advertisement for make sure like it is written like the rent is 450 POU. So I want to clear one thing, like POU means pay on utilities. So for this advertisement, if it is written POU, POU stands for pay on utilities, and the rent will be 450, and you are supposed to pay your own utilities on your own. So your rent doesn't include utilities like electricity, hot heating system, and your Wi-Fi and other kind of bills. So you are supposed to pay on your own those bills. So whenever you approach the advertisement, make sure you call them based on the info which they have provided, or wait for 2 days and don't like wait for the longer time, and just move to the other advertisement if you didn't receive any information, or they didn't call you back or text you back. And make sure to ask your concern, whichever you have, which in your mind, like related to having a pet there, or any other concern you have, and visit that rental property. Make sure and beware about the scams. Yeah. And if you find yourself in any kind of legal dispute, make sure to contact us at arrival@mun.ca, and we would assist you with that. And we would provide you the other information where you information and resources as well, where you can have a legal guidance from there. So PLIAN, we have the representative from the PLIAN Public Legal Association of Newfoundland. So we can connect you with that. You can, if you are an undergrad student, so you would be able to schedule a meeting with MUN students student union. So they would guide you with the case specific legal advice. And say if you are a student of graduate studies, so you would be able to contact the GSU for a legal guidance. And if you have any further question related to your arrival, so make sure to send an email to arrivals@mun.ca. Yeah, thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Deepika. Maria, I think you can go ahead and share your screen. And folks, please keep your questions for the after the presentation. We will get to your questions.
Sorry, I'm just trying to arrange myself.
Sure.
Okay, so that should be good. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, and you can see the presentation?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Okay, perfect. And everyone can hear me?
Yes.
So many questions. Okay. Okay, everyone, like I mentioned, I work for Public Legal Information Association. We're located on Water Street downtown, but you can always contact us by email or phone, or I can also come to you at MUN if you ever want to talk to me about anything, any questions you have about anything legal or landlord-tenant, like we're going to talk about today. So feel free. So just a little bit about PLIAN. Like I mentioned, we just provide legal education and information to all people in Newfoundland and Labrador. We are an independent nonprofit. We have offices in Goose Bay, in Labrador, and Corner Brook as well. And we do travel around the province quite a bit, sharing legal information and doing presentations on all topics of the law. Family law, criminal law, employment rights, workers' rights. That's another big one for students as well. And residential tenancies, which is what we're going to talk about today, and human rights as well. So I'm just going to skip right ahead to this slide. If you want to take a screenshot or a picture with your phone of this slide, that's how you can contact us, and my email will also be at the end of the presentation, so you can take another picture then as well. So let's get started. we are going to talk about the landlord-tenant relationship. So when you find a place to live in St. John's, you will have a landlord. That's the person that you are renting from. And when you are in that relationship, you are the tenant. You are the person who is renting. We're going to talk a little bit about paying rent, damages and repairs in the apartments, and the dispute resolution process. So this happens when you and the landlord don't agree on something, or there is a problem in your apartment or your house, and you need someone outside to help you solve the problem. So we're going to talk about that as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are going to talk about residential tenancies. This is a big, word, and it basically just means the law that we follow in Canada when it comes to renting. Okay, so this outlines the legal obligations between the landlord and the tenant in relation to the property in consideration. So that would be the apartment that you're renting. So you have legal obligations as the tenant, and the landlord has legal obligations as the landlord. You both have responsibilities when you are in this landlord-tenant relationship. And it's important to note, just here on the bottom of the slide, this law, the act, doesn't cover hospitals, tourism, inns, prisons, temporary shelters, like a homeless shelter or a domestic violence shelter, nursing homes, university residences, or cooperative housing. So this only covers rental properties. So if you're renting a house and sharing it with other students, or you're renting an apartment, you would be covered under residential tenancies. So very important thing before you move in is to walk through the apartment or house and take note of the condition of the property. So you're looking for things like if there's any damage. Okay, you're checking that the water turns on and off, that you have hot water, that the toilets flush and that they're working, that there's heat and that the heat works. You're looking for stuff like this. Anything that looks like it could be damaged or not working, you should make a note of this. So you can use the rental premises condition report, which can be found online. I can have that in the chat after. I'll put that in the chat after. Or you can just make notes of it while you're looking at the apartment. But definitely go to the rental and look around before you agree to move in, and make sure you take note if anything is broken or not working. Okay. Then the rental agreement. This is the agreement between you and the landlord. So you are the tenant, and then the landlord would have an agreement of how long is your, how long will you stay in the place? Will it be a year? Will it be 2 months, 6 months? You are going to have one of 3 types of rental agreements. It might be week to week, it might be month to month, or it might be a fixed term. So 6 to 12 months, for example. Now, most of you will likely have either a month-to-month rental agreement or a fixed term rental agreement. Usually it's 1 year. Rarely would you have a week-to-week agreement. All right. So what is in the rental agreement? So you are going to have things like the amount of rent that you're going to pay per month, the security deposit amount, which we are going to talk about in the next slide, and who's living in the apartment. Is it you? Are you going to have roommates? Things like this. If utilities, cable, internet are included. So sometimes when you have a rental agreement, the landlord will include, for example, internet and cable in the cost of the rent. Sometimes they won't. It will be extra. So this is very important to take note of, okay? Sometimes on a rental advertisement, you'll see something that says POU. That means you pay your own utilities, which means the rental price will have something extra when you pay your utilities. So for example, you might see a rental for $1,000 a month, but paying utilities might be an extra $250 a month, $500 a month. It just depends. The rental agreement will also include whether or not you can smoke in the house. These days, you likely cannot. I would be very surprised if you found a house now that these days in St. John's that you could smoke in. There would also be other conditions the landlord can add or agree to with you, but they still have to follow the law. And if you ever have any questions about your rental agreement, like you're not sure if something in there is legal or not, you can always contact us, or you can contact Bahar and she can contact me on your behalf. This is an important note down here. A rental agreement can be written or verbal. So you can discuss with the landlord verbally, and if you agree to something, that agreement is still legal, even if you just say it, okay? But the landlord must provide you, the tenant, with the rental agreement in written form. They are obligated to do this. And a copy of Residential Tenancies Act. This is the law. They should provide you with a copy of the law within 10 days of entering into the agreement. So you go see the apartment and you say, yes, I like it. I want to move in. The landlord says, okay, this is the rent. This is the security deposit, and it's going to be for 12 months. And you say, yeah, okay, I agree. Now you have a rental agreement, okay? 10 days from then, within 10 days, the landlord has to give that agreement to you on paper. If they don't, you don't have to pay rent until they give you the rental agreement in paper, on paper, a written agreement. So this is important to remember because many landlords don't or won't do this, won't provide it in writing, but they are obligated to do so. And you can ask them. You can ask them to give it to you in writing because they are required to do that. So the security or damage deposit. So this is money that you give the landlord in case you or a guest of yours causes damage to the apartment or house. The landlord should give you a receipt for this amount of money. And when you are moving out, when the lease ends or when the rental agreement is over, the landlord has to return the security deposit, that money, within 10 days of you moving out. There are cases where the landlord can keep the money, which we will talk about later. So, how much do you pay for the security or damage deposit? If it's a week-to-week agreement, which is unlikely for students, it's 2 weeks rent. If it's month-to-month, it's 3/4 of a month's rent. If it's a fixed term, it's also 3/4 of a month's rent. So you pay the landlord 3/4 of a month's rent as a damage deposit. They don't get to keep this, okay? They hold it in case you damage the apartment, okay? Now, a holding deposit is very different, and it's important you know the difference. The security deposit you will get back as long as you don't damage the apartment. And if the landlord doesn't give you back your damage deposit, you can apply to the government so that the government can make the landlord give it back to you. If you give a landlord a holding deposit, for example, if you see an apartment you like online and you contact the landlord and you say, I want this apartment and they ask you for money to hold on to it, you likely will not get this money back. I can say with surety that you almost 99% won't get this money back, and you cannot apply for the dispute resolution to get the money back. If you wanted to get the money back, you would have to go through a different legal process, which is called small claims court, and it's a completely different process. So it's important you know the difference between a security deposit and a holding deposit, and I would definitely caution you from ever giving a landlord a holding deposit. Okay? All right. So, Residential Tenancies Act, it has several rules about rent and if a landlord can increase rent, what happens if you don't pay rent. So I'm just going to give you a couple of like tips about that. If the landlord wants to increase the rent, they have to wait 12 months. So they cannot, within the first 12 months of you moving in, they cannot increase the rent. Okay? After 12 months, they can increase the rent, but they would have to give you 6 months notice before they increase the rent. So you would have to be living in a place for 1.5 years before the landlord could increase the rent, okay? And that's for month to month and fixed term. For week to week, the landlord has to give 8 weeks notice. But like I said, you likely won't encounter that type of rental agreement. If you pay, or if you don't pay your rent, or if you're late on paying the rent, I would always talk to your landlord first. If you think you might be late paying your rent, give them notice. Sometimes landlords will be understanding if it's a matter of just like a delayed paycheck or you don't have the money and you're going to have it on payday, which is 10 days after the rent is due. Everybody gets in different situations. Talk to your landlord and see if you can work something out with them. But if you are late with the rent, you can be charged a fee for late payment. And termination notice, meaning the landlord can ask you to move out if rent is 5 days late. And then you would be given 10 days notice to move out. If this happens and your rent is 5 days late and the landlord gives you 10 days notice to move out, if within that 10 days you pay the rent, then you don't have to move out anymore. But you can only do this twice within a 12-month period. If the third time your rent is late and the landlord gives you that 10 days notice to move out, even if you pay the rent within that 10 days, you would still have to move out. So keep that in mind. I know this is a lot of information and you can contact me anytime that you want clarification or that you have questions. So what's the landlord and tenant responsibilities? So basically, you guys, have to pay the rent on time. Whoops. You are responsible for keeping the apartment clean. This is very important because a landlord can ask you to move out if you don't keep the apartment clean. So it's very important that you keep it clean. Repair any damage that you cause. If you cause the damage, of course, you have to repair it or pay to repair it. And also follow the rules of your rental agreement and give proper notice if you want to move out. The landlord's responsibilities, of course, as I mentioned, they have to provide you with the rental agreement within 10 days. They have to keep the property, repaired or make repairs if something breaks or doesn't work and it's not your fault. They are required to repair it for you. They have to make sure the apartment is safe and secure, locks on the doors, that you have heat, light, running water, hot water. This is all things that the landlord is responsible for. If you are ever in a situation where the landlord is not doing these things, please contact us or contact Bahar and we can help walk you through the process of how to ensure that the landlord is following the law. So the landlord can give 24 hours written notice to enter the property. So if you are renting an apartment and the landlord wants to come in the apartment for some reason, to fix something or to check something, they can give you 24 hours written notice. It should be for a reasonable thing. Like it should be to do a repair or to check something. Some landlords might have a storage area in the apartment. They might want to come in and get something. It should be reasonable. The landlord should not just be coming into your apartment for no reason. If you think that they are, contact us. They can give 4 hours notice if you're moving out to enter the apartment. And of course, in case of an emergency, for example, flooding or something like this, they can enter your apartment without notice. But of course, they cannot enter your house without giving notice or getting your permission. So if you want to end a lease, excuse me. So for week to week, I'm just not going to talk about this because, like I said, it won't apply. If you do find yourself in a week to week agreement, by all means, you can contact us to ask the question. So, oops. The month to month lease agreement, you have to give not less than 1 month notice to the landlord to move out. If it's a fixed term, so like 6 to 12 months, you cannot give less than 2 months notice if you want to move out. This is standard notice, meaning that there are no other problems or issues, okay? Now, if the landlord wants you to move out on a month-to-month agreement, they have to give at least 3 months notice. On a fixed term, it's also 3 months notice. So the landlord is required to give more time to the tenant if they want the tenant to move out, obviously because the tenant would then have to find another place to live, and you know, that can be difficult and stressful. So the landlord is always required to give you 3 months notice. Landlords will try to give you less, but it's your legal right to have 3 months notice. And like I said, contact us if you ever find yourself in a situation where this is not being followed. What if you want to move out early? Okay, there are cases where you might want to move out before your agreement is up, or you might want to not give the right amount of notice. Things happen. Lots of people find themselves in situations where they aren't able to give the right amount of notice. So you have some options. You can sublet. So when you sublet, you are a mini landlord. So you would find somebody to have a rental agreement with you, and they would take over your room or your apartment or your house. You do have to get written consent from the landlord to do this, okay? So in this situation, if you sublet, you have an agreement with the landlord. Then you also have an agreement with the new tenant who's taking over your place. In this situation, your damage deposit is not returned to you until the end of the original rental agreement. So if you have a rental agreement for 6 months and you move out 3 months in and you find someone to take your place, you still don't get your damage deposit back until the end of the 6 months. The other option is assignment. So someone can take over the rental agreement. That means you're done. So you are not in the middle between the landlord and the tenant. If you find someone to take an assignment, your original damage deposit should be returned to you within 10 days of moving out. So these are 2 options if you want to move out early. You can also give early termination notice with special circumstances, and this could be illness, or you are in the hospital or nursing home. if you're caring for an ill family member, death, or family violence. And you would have to give 1 month's notice. Early termination with notice, or sorry, with cause. If there's a breach of the rental agreement, for example, if the landlord is doing something that they're not supposed to and it's causing you problems, you can move out early. The landlord can ask you to move out early if you are not paying the rent or you're doing something wrong. If the place is not livable, for example, the water stops working and you don't have water, running water, you can move out. You can move out immediately. If something like that happens, you can move out immediately with no notice. The other thing I will mention is peaceful enjoyment. So if you are in an apartment and the people who live upstairs, for example, are playing loud music until 3 o'clock in the morning every single night, and you've asked them to stop, you've talked to the landlord, nothing's changing, you can't sleep, you can also move out early. The notice period is different depending on what the cause is. So I will have to put that in the chat as well. I'll put a link in the chat as well at the end. So let's talk then about what happens if you and the landlord don't agree on something and you have a problem. So first of all, I would always recommend trying to solve the problem with the landlord. Trying to work things out reasonably is always a better option. Often this doesn't work. So then we have what's called the dispute resolution. So I'll give you an example. Say you're moving out and the landlord is not going to give you back your damage deposit. And they think they have a right to keep it and you think they don't. You guys would then access this dispute resolution process. You fill out an application and you send it to the Landlord Tenant Board, which is a department of the government, and they will file it, and then they will contact you and arrange a hearing. So a hearing is when you and the landlord speak with someone who's an adjudicator, and they decide what to do about the situation. So they might say, yes, the landlord can keep the damage deposit because the tenant caused damages. Or they might say, no, the landlord cannot keep the damage deposit because there are no damages and they're keeping it for the wrong reasons. So these hearings are usually done by teleconference these days. So you would appear on the computer or calling in. And you can provide evidence at these hearings. So like text messages, pay slips, e-transfers, anything to prove your side of the argument. And yeah, sometimes it works out in the favor of the tenant. Sometimes it doesn't. I can't really tell you how it would go one way or the other because each case is different. But if you ever do have a problem with your rental agreement or your landlord and you can't agree or figure it out, you can use this process. I know this process very well inside out. So if you ever need to, ask questions about it or you need some guidance about this process, again, contact Bahar. She can put you in touch with me, or you can contact me directly. So what could happen at the end of a dispute resolution? These are just some examples. The landlord might have to pay the tenant money, or the tenant might have to pay the landlord money. The tenant might have to move out. Maybe the landlord wants you to move out because you didn't keep the apartment clean and they asked you and gave you time to clean it up and you didn't. You might have to move out because of that. Validity of a notice to move out. For example, if the landlord asks you to move out in 2 weeks, but they are required to give you 3 months notice. They might have to let you stay in the apartment. Or if they have a good reason to ask you to move out, you might have to move out. It depends. Yeah, so there's all kinds of reasons why, or outcomes for the dispute resolution, and these are just some of them. So the adjudicator will review the statements and the evidence from both the landlord and the tenants and make a decision based on the law, the Residential Tenancies Act. And if you don't like the decision, you do have the option to appeal it to the Supreme Court. But it would have to be because there was an error in the law. Okay. It couldn't just be like, I don't agree. You would have to find a reason why the adjudicator made a mistake according to the law. So appealing to the Supreme Court is not always a good option. It can cost a lot of money. And it's not always like worth the time and money. Especially when it comes to things like damage deposits, which $700 is a lot of money if that's what you're paying as a damage deposit, but it's even more money sometimes to appeal something in the Supreme Court. And this is the contact information for the Landlord Tenant Board. If you have any questions for them directly, you can obviously call them. If you don't want to call them directly, you can call me. And this is my contact information. So this is my email address, newcomers@publiclegalinfo.com. You can email me anytime. Like I said, I know it's a lot of information. I always try and like change these presentations to make them more user-friendly, but it's difficult when you're talking about the law. So I'm more than happy to answer questions if you have them as well. And yeah, that's all from me.
Perfect. Let me stop the recording.